Hello everyone, welcome back to another webinar. Today we are going to be continuing with our series on Inspector Calls. This is the second of 3 webinars on Inspector Calls. Last week's webinar we looked at characters as, I can't believe it's just gone out of my head, characters as constructs. And so if you missed last week, then please you can go and have a look at that on my channel under the live tabs. You should be able to, under the live tab, you should be able to see last week's webinar. And so building up on that, we are going to be looking at characters as symbols. So it's building on last week's webinar. So there are some similarities, but we're just taking it a step further and being a bit more specific. So my name is Danai the Tutor. Sorry, I haven't introduced myself. And I am an English teacher. And now I am not working in schools anymore, but I am tutoring English. And so, as I said, today we are focusing on Inspector Calls, okay, characters as symbols. So again, a little bit about myself. I did work as a secondary school teacher, and I started tutoring in 2022 when my husband and I welcomed our daughter. I love baking, watching cooking shows, and playing tennis. Don't have much time for that lately, but I do love that. So what are we going to cover today? As I said, we are looking at how characters can be symbols, how to use this idea in your analysis, example paragraphs. So there'll be specific example paragraphs which you can pause and copy down, take a screenshot of and save. And you also have opportunities to ask questions. Okay, so that's what we're going to be covering today. So if you are interested, I have English classes. Obviously, these webinars are very helpful and they're extremely beneficial, but the classes will allow you to do extended work, get feedback on that, and to get into more detail about some of the things we're covering. Because for an Inspector Call, for example, we're doing these 3 webinars. But the classes are every week. So if you're interested in those, you can join. I also have English language webinars and a Christmas Carol webinars, which you can book on my website, www.danaithetutor.com. And these classes, will they make a difference? Yes. I've got some reviews here. I've had students jump 3 grades. I've had students achieving grade 7s, 8s. And these are just some reviews to help you to understand that these classes, they do work, and the methods that I implement, they do work and have worked for students, and they build up your confidence, not only for your GCSEs, but beyond as well. Your GCSEs are the foundations for whatever you want to do. And one of my students recently followed up with me. They achieved an A star and 2 A's at A level. And they know that the work they did at GCSE, including the classes that they did with me, helped them to do that, okay? So it is beneficial. If you are benefiting from this, please like the video, subscribe, and feel free to share this video with anyone who you think will help. It will help. Okay, so last week we had a look at my camera. Last week, we had a look at the mark scheme, okay, for AQA and Edexcel. And we highlighted the things in red, and we were focusing on being critical. We're building on this, okay, as I mentioned. So if your exam board is AQA, then the idea of symbols fits into writers' methods, okay, because symbolism is a specific technique, writer's technique. And then if you're Edexcel, this helps in building your perceptive understanding. Again, it links to the idea of understanding that the characters are constructs and having a deeper understanding of that. With Edexcel, you do not have to analyze language and structure, okay? You don't get any marks for that. There's no expectation for that. And you shouldn't waste time doing that. So again, in the classes, I can go into specific detail for the differences in what Edexcel and AQA paragraphs look like. But what we're doing today, it works for both, okay? It works for both. So that's how it fits into the mark scheme. And again, this is the top bands for each of the mark schemes that we are working towards and aiming for. Okay, so first of all, I just want us to have a clear understanding of what symbol means. Okay, what does it mean? What is a symbol? So I want you to have a think now. Okay, A, B, C, D, or E. What is the correct definition of symbol? This is really, really important to get clear before we carry on, because again, it's a webinar. So I'm not going to assume that you already know what this means. If you already do know what this means, then great, this is a great refresher. But it's really important that you understand what a symbol is. So have a think now for the next 30 seconds, and then we'll have a look at the answer. Which of the ones listed, A, B, C, or D, is a correct definition of symbol? Please type in A, B, C, D, or E. Okay, I've got B from Shirley. Thank you. Okay, so we'll have a look. Yes, okay. A symbol is a character or object representing a deeper meaning beyond its literal sense. So hopefully you can see how this again links with what we covered last week in terms of characters as constructs, understanding that a character is a created thing that was created by the writer for a specific purpose. Okay. And so when we're thinking about characters as symbols, we're taking that further and thinking more specifically about what it is that they represent and how this links with their actions and the events that happen in the text, whether it's a play like we're doing today, or it's a novel, if we're looking at, another text. And to just solidify this definition of symbols, we come across symbols in our everyday life, okay? I haven't put any words, okay, but I'm sure you can name most, if not all, of the symbols that these logos relate to, okay? So a symbol, again, it's about the idea that when you look at this thing, it represents something else beyond itself. So for example, if we look at the Facebook logo, it's a blue circle with an F in the middle, okay? That's literally what it is. But we all understand when we see that logo, it represents something else. And that's exactly the same thing with characters. When you look at these characters, if you're thinking at a grade 9 level, you don't just look at the characters and just literally think about them on a literal level. You think about what they represent, okay? Beyond the fact that Mr. Burling is a man in his 50s who is heavy looking with a provincial accent. That's not the exact quote. Beyond that, it's about thinking about, okay, what do these things actually mean? Okay, what is he supposed to represent? So if you think like that constantly and you link the actions of the characters, the events that unfold, the things that they say, if you link that with what they symbolize, then you are thinking at that analytical, critical level that will get you the grade 7, 8s, and 9s. Okay, so the characters, okay, they represent something. So these are some of the messages in the play, okay? Capitalism, redemption, moral ambivalence, ambivalence meaning something that is kind of straddling between two things, or someone that is not resolute in one thing. So they're going between two things basically. So moral ambivalence, class prejudice, moral awakening, collective responsibility. So all of these can be linked with each of the characters. These are the messages in the play. So when we're thinking about what do these characters symbolize, okay, these are some of the things. These are not all the things that each character symbolizes, but these are some of them, the main ones we can say. So what I would like you to do now is, sorry, I believe there was something wrong with the connection. Hopefully you can still hear me. So for the next 2 minutes, I would like you to match the characters with the symbols, okay? 2 minutes, have a think about which character best represents which symbol. And again, feel free to type in your answers. So thank you, Shirley, for your earlier response. If you you can either just write it down and then compare with what comes on the screen, or you can actually type it and we can have a little discussion about it before we move on. So the next 2 minutes now, match the characters with the symbols. Okay, 2 minutes starting now. Okay, 40 seconds left, just over halfway. Okay, 2 minutes is up. So we're going to have a look at the answers. So if you want to add in yours now, you can do so. But we'll have a look at the answers, okay? So Arthur Berling, capitalism. So we had a little look at Arthur last week, okay? And then Sybil Berling or Mrs. Berling, class prejudice. And then Eric can be seen to represent redemption. Sheila, moral awakening. Gerald, moral ambivalence. Inspector Gould, collective responsibility. Eva Smith, the voiceless. Okay, so you can compare this with, what you had written down, and hopefully you got most of them. If not, that's okay. That's something that you can take from today and learn. Okay, so when we again thinking about characters as symbols, these are the things on the right of the screen can be would be the symbols. Okay, they would be the symbols. So when you're thinking about Arthur Berling, you're not just thinking about the character as in a man in his 50s, you're thinking about the fact that he represents capitalism. Okay, Sybil Berling, she represents class prejudice. Okay, and so when you're reading the play, and I'm not sure, some of you may have already read the play once, twice, depending on what year you're in. But when you're now reading the play or rereading the play, you look at everything that the characters do in terms of what they represent. And immediately you're being analytical when you're doing that. You're not reading it on a literal level simply, but you are looking at how the actions of the characters link with what they represent. Okay, so you might be asking yourself, how do I use this to improve my grade? Okay, so whether it's for a character-based question or a theme-based question, okay, you can use this in your introduction, for example. If you're given a question about Sheila, you're not just going to introduce your essay talking about what Sheila does. You're going to talk about what she represents. Okay, you're going to say something along the lines of, Priestley uses Sheila to symbolize the moral awakening that was necessary, or that he deemed necessary for the upper class, okay, in 1945 or in post-World War II Britain, okay? You're not just going to talk about the fact that Inspector Gould questioned everybody. You're going to say Priestley used Inspector Gould as a vehicle to symbolize the importance of collective responsibility in order to, and then you carry on. Okay, so you're going, this is something that you can use to drive your response. You can also use it as part of your analytical paragraph. So whether you're taught at school to write PEE paragraphs, Peter paragraphs, whichever way, if you add this to your analysis, again, it will elevate your analysis. Similarly to using it in your introduction, you can use it in your conclusion as well, okay? So how do these symbols show up? They show up in the characteristics of the character. They show up in the physical appearance and the behavior of the characters, in the decisions that the characters make in the play, and also in how events turn out for the character. For example, Eva Smith, okay? The fact that she represents the voiceless. We can see how the events that unfold in the play link with that symbol, that idea, okay? And we can see how she symbolizes that idea in how the events turn out for her in the play. So there are going to be different ways that these symbols show up, which is why it's really important to know the play inside out, okay? Because then you can pull out the references as you need with the understanding of what these characters represent. So we're going to have a read of this. We did read it last week, but we're going to read it again, and we're going to be looking for how these symbols are showing up, okay? How are they showing up in this part of the play? So I want you to have in mind, okay, we'll go back. This is what I want you to have in mind, okay? The fact that Arthur Burling is a symbol of capitalism, the fact that Sybil Burling is a symbol of class prejudice, okay? So if you haven't got this written down yet, make sure you write it down, because this is what I want you to have in mind as we reread those stage directions from the beginning of the play, because I want you to look for how these things are showing up in those stage directions, because this is analytical reading in practice. So we're going to do that now. Hopefully you've got those written down. I'll give you maybe 10 more seconds, okay? 10 more seconds. And I want you to bear them in mind as we read and look for them. Okay, so Edna, the parlour maid, is just clearing the table, which has no cloth, of the dessert plates and champagne glasses, etc., and then replacing them with decanter of port, cigar box, and cigarettes. Port glasses are already on the table. All 5 are in evening dress of the period. The men in tails and white tails, not dinner jackets. Arthur Burling is a heavy-looking, rather portentous man in his middle 50s. Yes, with fairly easy manners, but rather provincial in his speech. His wife is about 50, a rather cold woman, and her husband's social superior. Sheila is a pretty girl in her early 20s, very pleased with life and rather excited. Gerald Croft is an attractive chap about 30, rather too manly to be dandy, but very much the well-bred young man about town. Eric is in his early 20s, not quite at ease, half shy, half assertive. At the moment, they have all had a good dinner, are celebrating a special occasion, and are pleased with themselves. Okay, so let's have a look. I've highlighted some, okay, quotes that might be of interest. So have a think about how these symbols are showing up in these descriptions. Arthur Burling, again, we had a look at him last week. So we should be able to start making links with that description, with what he represents, because we actually started to think about that and to write about that, even though we didn't explicitly refer to it as a symbol, him as a symbol. But have a look at each of those, okay? And I want you to just have a think, and you can type in your thoughts as well about how these descriptions link with what it is that these characters symbolize. Okay, hopefully you've been able to start making links. Some of them are going to be easier than others. And as I said, the symbols that we looked at today, or the specific things, sorry, that they symbolize, they're not everything that each character symbolizes. Okay, they're more to explore. Those are the ones that we're just looking at today. But some of these are going to be easier to spot than others. Okay, so for example, I'll go with Sheila. Okay, because that it's not particularly obvious, maybe because Sheila represents moral awakening. Okay, so the idea of being aware now of what's right and what's wrong. And we can see here that it says that she's very pleased with life and rather excited. Okay, so at the start of the play, there, this is more of a contrast because with how she is the rest of the play. Okay, because for the rest of the play, after the inspector comes, she's not at all pleased. She's not pleased by how she behaved. She's very remorseful and repentant about her behavior towards Eva Smith, but she's extremely displeased with how her family reacts. Okay, so the difference between how she is at the beginning, before the inspector comes, and after, it's night and day. It's like the difference between being asleep and awake, because she experiences a moral awakening. So the contrast between how she is here and how we see her develop highlights her moral awakening. Because when the inspector comes and speaks to the family, she wakes up. Okay. And so with these stage directions that inform us about her character before the inspector, they highlight the change and the journey that she goes through in the play. Because of course, one of the other things that is important about Sheila and Eric as the younger generation is that they learn that they change. So we can see that contrast, okay? That's very key for Sheila's character, which is different to, for example, Arthur Burling, who doesn't change at all during the play. Okay, so with Sheila, we can see that's how the moral awakening shows up. So again, if you have any thoughts, any questions, please type them in and we can have a look and have a discussion. So today we're going to be building on what we wrote about Arthur Burling, and then we're going to be focusing on Mrs. Burling. Okay, we're going to be focusing our writing and our thinking on Mrs. Burling. So I would like you now to spend the next 2 minutes. I just want you to add your understanding of what Mr. Burling symbolizes to this paragraph. So we begin to touch on it in this paragraph, but what can you say to demonstrate that knowledge a bit more explicitly in this paragraph? So I'm just going to give you 2 minutes. I want you to have a think. What would you add? So we know that Mr. Burling represents capitalism, or is a symbol of capitalism. And we do mention capitalism in this paragraph. We mentioned it last week. But again, to just to demonstrate that knowledge, what could you add to this paragraph? So I'll give you 2 minutes, and again, you can type this in if you'd like some feedback on it. But this is just a chance for you to put into practice what we've learned so far, and before we move on. Okay, so 2 minutes for that, starting now. Okay, so to this paragraph, we might add that Arthur Berling is a symbol of capitalism. Therefore, the presentation of him as overweight highlights the selfish excesses of the upper class that Priestley views as responsible for the inequality in society. Okay, so now we're going to move on to Mrs. Berling, and we're going to have a look at how she's described. Okay, she's described as a rather cold woman and her husband's social superior. And I've highlighted 2 things there. The last bit, we can ignore that for now, or you can look at it actually if you want. But I'm going to be focusing on the first part, a rather cold woman. Okay. So when we're thinking about how she's represented and thinking about what we can write about her, first of all, you need to explain how the quote highlights the symbol. Okay. How does a quote highlight what Mrs. Berling represents? And we know that Mrs. Berling represents class prejudice. Okay, so Mrs. Berling represents class prejudice. And just to clarify, class refers to the system that divides society according to how much people make, mainly. That's not the only determinant of class, but money is the main thing. Okay. And broadly speaking, there are 3 classes: working, middle, and upper. So we have the upper class, for example, the Berling family is an example of an upper class family, okay? Because they're wealthy. Mr. Berling is a business owner. Mrs. Berling is her husband's social superior, okay? And specifically that's because she comes from a wealthy family. Whereas Mr. Berling, he built his wealth from his own business. So that's what actually makes her her husband's social superior. So there's the idea of class, and then prejudice, which means prejudging someone. Okay, having an assumption about someone's worth basically based on, it could be their class, how much money they have, their race, their gender, prejudice, okay, prejudging someone. And Mrs. Burling represents this, okay, class prejudice. And you, when you're answering this question and writing this paragraph, you have to think about, why is this a problem for Priestley? Okay, why would Priestley think class prejudice is a problem? Obviously, we can all think no and understand why it would be an issue, why prejudice is an issue, full stop. But you have to think specifically about the writer, their message, and why it's a problem in relation to the writer's values and the message that they're trying to put across. So I've jumped to bullet point 3 there, talking about Priestley, but we'll just go there and go back to bullet point 2. So think about Priestley's overall message, okay? And a reminder, Priestley's overall message is about collective responsibility. He was an advocate for socialism, which was, in his view, a way of minimizing, potentially eradicating social inequality, okay? So think about that and how that links, and why Mrs. Burling might be, her behavior might be an issue, a hindrance towards that. So bullet point 2, give an example of an event from the play. So again, I'm not sure where you're up to in terms of the play, but think of an example of something that happens in the play that demonstrates Mrs. Burling's class prejudice, okay? It doesn't have to be a quote, it just has to be an event for the sake of this paragraph and demonstrating your understanding. So I'm going to give you 5 minutes for this, okay? 5 minutes to just type up your answer to how Mrs. Burling is presented, covering how the quote that's on the screen highlights that symbol, give an example of the play, and then link it with Priestley's overall message. The paragraph example I'll be showing you focuses on the first part of that quote, the fact that she's a rather cold woman, okay? So 5 minutes for that, and then we'll have a look at the example paragraph. And again, if you would like feedback on yours, feel free to type it in. So 5 minutes for that starts now. Okay, halfway there. So 2.5 minutes left now before we look at the example paragraph. 2.5 minutes left. Okay, a minute left. Thank you, Shirley, for that. So you said Mrs. Burling isn't a friendly person. She comes from a higher social class than Mr. Burling. Okay, good. So thinking about the fact that Mrs. Burling is a character constructed. So again, think about what we learned last week. I would like you to just add that Priestley presents Mrs. Burling, okay, as. Start your sentence with that because that highlights that you understand that, again, she's not a real person, okay? She is a character that's been constructed. We've got 20 more seconds, so I'll add on to that as we look at the example paragraph in a minute. I'll just give you 20 more seconds. Okay, so time is up. Okay, so thank you, Shirley, for yours. So I'll give you some feedback on that. Okay, so what you've written there is showing that you understand what the quote says, but you are not actually analyzing the quote in terms of what Priestley's doing in presenting her as a friend, as a person who isn't friendly. So you're correct; she's not a friendly person, but why is that? Okay, I want you to think about why the writer has created her as a person who's not friendly. Okay, and yes, she also comes from a higher social class than Mr. Burling. That's true. Okay, but I want you to just focus on the first part, the fact that she's not a friendly person. Why do you think she's represented? So why do you think she's presented in that way? Especially considering the fact that she symbolizes class prejudice. Okay, so that's what I want you to how you would improve it. So I'll show you an example paragraph now. Okay, in light of your response. Okay, so the example paragraph reads: Priestley describes Mrs. Burling as a rather cold woman. This characterization of her allows her to be an effective symbol of class prejudice because it enables Priestley to highlight the ruthless and unsympathetic attitudes of many in the upper class. So I'm going to pause it right there before I carry on because that's quite a long sentence. So what I want you to take from that, Shirley, is the fact that in my paragraph, I've written about why she's presented in that way. Okay, so I've put in my first sentence, Priestley describes Mrs. Burling as a rather cold woman. Okay, and then I have started to actually say why she's being described that way. And the reason, okay, is that it's allowing her to be a symbol of class prejudice. So remember, that's what she represents, class prejudice. And that's something that is negative, something that Priestley is criticizing about the upper class in Britain at the time. Okay. So her being a cold woman, or as you put it, she isn't friendly. And the reason for that is that Priestley is pointing a finger, highlighting that The upper class are ruthless and unsympathetic. Okay, he's highlighting and spotlighting that. That's why she isn't a friendly person. So you need to add that to your paragraph. She isn't a friendly person because, okay, or she's presented that way because. And the reason is because Priestley wants to highlight the ruthless and unsympathetic attitudes of many in the upper class. Okay, so that's how I would improve your paragraph. Okay, but I'll carry on. So it, as we say, highlights the ruthless and unsympathetic attitudes of many in the upper class who, despite having the resources, were unwilling to extend help to working class people in need. Mrs. Burling, so now the example from the play, Mrs. Burling's refusal to help Eva Smith is a key event that exemplified class prejudice. So again, this happens, this is revealed towards the end of the play, not quite at the end, but towards the end, that Mrs. Burling refused to help Eva Smith, okay, even though she is the chair of a women's charity that's supposed to help women in need. She refused to help her, okay, which Priestley perceived to contribute to social inequality. So this idea of class prejudice, in Priestley's eyes, was a key contributor to social inequality, something that needed to change, which is why he was highlighting it in the play. Okay, so that's an example. So this, again, you can copy this down, take a screenshot to have a look later. But that's how you would write effectively about Mrs. Burling's character, for example. Okay, so always, always, always say why they're being presented that way. Yes, show your understanding, but always say why. Okay, everything has to link to why they're being presented in that specific way. Okay. Any other questions or not questions, anything else you want feedback on, please type it in. Okay, so the next thing I want to highlight to you is how you can use this to develop your understanding and also for your revision as well. Okay, so we've obviously in this lesson looked at the characters. We know what they symbolize, but then also we want the quotes that go along with that as well. Okay, and this is something that you can do for your revision, and you might need more space for more quotes, but this is just a rough layout of how you could use this in your revision. So building up some quotes that link specifically with the symbol. Okay, so whenever you talk about that character, you want to be able to mention that symbol and the relevant quotation that goes with that. Okay, so this is like just a top tip, a little freebie for today. Okay, this is how you could use this in your revision, making sure that you are linking what it is that they are a symbol of with the quotes, the things that they say, because in your exam, you are not going to have the text. Okay, you are not going to have the text. You are not going to be given an extract. AQA and Edexcel do not give students extracts for these texts in the exam. So you need to remember key quotations. So for example, Mrs. Burling, a rather cold woman, or even cold woman, or even cold, just remembering that she's described as cold, okay, is going to link extremely well with the fact that she is a symbol of class prejudice, okay? Now, obviously, the other thing is about putting those things together, okay, and learning, just like we did today, okay? When you do it for the first time, you might not do it as best as you'll be able to do it with some feedback, okay? Which is why I do like to give time to give some feedback in these webinars. But also, again, with classes, you're actually able to get extended feedback from your extended writing, which is going to be key for you improving your grade. That's what's going to improve your grade. You being able to complete a piece of work, get an understanding of what you did well, and how you can build on that. So again, Shirley, you understand what the quote is saying to you, and that's good. You just need to build on that now by talking about, well, why are they presented in that way? What are they symbolizing? Okay. And also adding in a key quote. Okay. So for example, cold woman would be a key quote that you could add to your response just there. Okay. So if you want to have the opportunity to have that feedback, again, you can join one of the lessons, okay, which I have for an Inspector Calls every Thursday. If you would like that, you can book a lesson at www.lanaithetutor.com, and you just have to click book online and you can see the lessons there that you can book. So do you have any other questions or anything that you've written that you might want some feedback on for today? Feel free to add that now. I'll just give it a minute or two to see if you've got any questions, anything that you'd like clarification on. Maybe there's something that we said today, even if it's the meaning of a word, okay, that you're not sure of and you want me to go over that, we can do that. I'll just give you a minute. Okay, so next week will be the final webinar on an Inspector Calls, and it will be on Tuesday again at the same time. So hopefully I'll see you then. And well done, very, very well done for today. I'm sure you've already had a full day of school and then you've taken the time out to do even more work after school. So really, really well done for that. And just again, if you would like to join one of my lessons, feel free, you can join this week. And you can book online at www.lanaithetutor.com. You can join the Inspector Calls lessons. We have English language lessons as well, and a Christmas Carol lessons on Fridays from 6 to 7 p.m. Okay, so hopefully you've learned lots today. Thank you once again for your hard work and showing up. Really, really well done. And I'll see you for another webinar next week. The final and Inspector Calls webinar next week. So see you then. Have a good week.